The winter wind cut through the Colorado mountains like a knife as Sarah Mitchell stepped off the stagecoach in the dying light of afternoon. Her hands trembled, though not from the cold. She clutched the worn letter in her gloved fingers, reading the address one more time. Blackwood Ranch, 3 miles north. The stagecoach driver, a grizzled man with kind eyes, set her single trunk on the frozen ground. "You sure about this, miss? Elijah Blackwood he ain't known for hospitality." Sarah lifted her chin, though fear pooled in her stomach. "I'm expected." The driver's expression said he doubted that very much, but he tipped his hat and climbed back onto his coach. Within minutes, she stood alone on the desolate road, watching the stage disappear into the gathering darkness. She was 21 years old, recently orphaned, and had exactly $4 to her name. The advertisement had been clear. Housekeeper needed for remote ranch, room and board provided, wages fair. She'd written immediately, desperate. His reply had been brief, almost curt, but it had included a train ticket and instructions. Now, as she stared at the narrow trail leading into the pine forest, Sarah wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The stories about Elijah Blackwood were legend, even back in Kansas City, where she'd lived with her aunt. A mountain of a man, they said. 7 feet tall, some claimed, though that seemed impossible. Scarred and mean, with eyes like a devil. He'd killed 3 men in a single fight, or was it 5? Some said he'd gone mad after the war, retreated to these mountains, and hadn't spoken to another soul in years. And yet, he'd answered her letter. He needed help. Sarah picked up her trunk, grunting at its weight, and began walking. The trail was steep, winding through towering pines that blocked what little remained of the daylight. Her boots crunched on frozen ground. An hour passed, then another. Her arms ached, her breath came in white puffs, and still no ranch appeared. Just as panic began to set in, she saw it. A clearing opened before her, and in its center stood a large log cabin, smoke rising from its chimney. Outbuildings dotted the property, a barn, a stable, what looked like a workshop. Everything was neat, well-maintained, which surprised her given the stories. But what caught her attention, what made her stop dead in her tracks, was the man standing in the doorway of the cabin. Elijah Blackwood wasn't 7 feet tall, but he was close enough to make her throat go dry, 6.5 feet at least, with shoulders so broad they nearly filled the doorframe. He wore simple clothes, dark pants and a worn shirt, sleeves rolled up despite the cold. His hair was black as coal, longer than was fashionable, touching his collar. But it was his face that made her heart stutter. A scar ran from his left temple down to his jaw, angry and thick. His nose had been broken at least once. His jaw was hard, unforgiving, and his eyes, even from this distance, were the darkest she'd ever seen, watching her with an intensity that made her want to run. "Miss Mitchell." His voice was deep, rough, like gravel rolling in a barrel. Not a question, a statement. "Mr. Blackwood." She forced herself to walk forward, to climb the 3 steps to his porch. Even standing on the elevated surface, she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. She was 5'3". He made her feel like a child. His eyes moved over her, assessing. She saw his jaw tighten, a muscle jumping there. "You're smaller than I expected." Heat flooded her cheeks. She'd always been petite, delicate, her aunt had called it, though she'd meant it as criticism. "I assure you, I'm stronger than I look." "I can work hard, Mr. Blackwood. I won't disappoint you." Something flickered in his dark eyes, gone before she could name it. He stepped back, gesturing her inside. "You walked from town. The stage dropped me at the road." He went very still. "That's over 3 miles, in the dark, with your trunk." "I managed." For a long moment he simply stared at her. Then he moved past her down the steps and lifted her trunk as though it weighed nothing. His hands were enormous, scarred like his face, but careful as he carried her belongings inside. The cabin's interior was surprisingly warm, surprisingly clean. A fire crackled in a massive stone fireplace. Simple furniture, well made, filled the main room. A kitchen area occupied one corner, a dining table another. 2 doors led to what she assumed were bedrooms. "Your room." He nodded toward the door on the left. "Mine's on the right. Kitchen's stocked, but I'll show you the pantry tomorrow." "You cook?" "Yes, sir." "Clean?" "Yes, sir." "Sew, mend, tend a garden. All of it, sir. He set her trunk down by the bedroom door, then turned to face her. Up close, his size was even more overwhelming. She had to crane her neck to see his face. His expression was unreadable, that scar pulling at his features. Rules, he said quietly. I work from dawn till dark most days. I'll need breakfast before sunup. Lunch brought to wherever I'm working. Dinner at dusk. I'm not particular about food, long as it's hot and filling. Monday's laundry day. I'll need the house kept clean, my clothes mended. You'll have Sundays off, though there's nowhere to go. Sarah nodded, absorbing the information. I don't entertain visitors. Don't get many anyway. If anyone comes by, you call for me. Don't open the door to strangers. His voice dropped lower. And stay out of my room. Understood? Yes, sir. He studied her for another long moment, and she could swear she saw something like regret in his eyes. People in town probably told you stories about me. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes, most of them true. She met his gaze steadily. I don't know, Mr. Blackwood. I don't believe everything I hear. The corner of his mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. Smart. Get some rest, Miss Mitchell. I'll need breakfast at 5. He turned and walked to his own room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Sarah stood in the main room, her heart pounding, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The first week passed in a blur of work. Sarah rose before dawn, started the fire, and had coffee and breakfast ready when Elijah emerged from his room. He ate in silence, nodded his thanks, and disappeared outside. She'd bring lunch to him wherever he was working, the barn, the stable, the far pasture. He'd eat quickly, say nothing, and return to his tasks. Dinner was the same. He'd come in at dusk, wash up, sit at the table. She'd serve him, he'd eat, and then he'd retire to his room. Sometimes she'd hear him moving around late at night, restless. He wasn't cruel, wasn't unkind. He just wasn't anything. He barely looked at her, barely spoke. It was like living with a ghost, except this ghost was 7 feet of solid muscle and barely contained intensity. But Sarah noticed things. She noticed that he always thanked her for meals, even though his voice was gruff. She noticed that he chopped extra wood and stacked it by the door so she wouldn't have to carry the heavy logs. She noticed that he'd repaired the latch on her bedroom door without being asked. She noticed that he never raised his voice, never moved too quickly around her, as though afraid of startling her, and she noticed the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. Those dark eyes following her movements, expression unreadable but intense, so intense it made her skin warm. On her first Sunday off, she explored the property. The snow had stopped, and weak winter sunlight broke through the clouds. She found the chicken coop, empty now but well built. The garden plot, frozen hard but clearly tended in summer. The workshop, filled with half-finished furniture, beautiful pieces made with obvious skill. You shouldn't be out here. She spun around. Elijah stood a few feet away, having appeared silent as a cat despite his size. He wore a heavy coat, his breath misting in the cold air. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I was just... It's fine. He moved past her into the workshop, and after a moment's hesitation, she followed. He ran a hand over a partially carved chair back, his touch gentle. You like it? It's beautiful. You made all this? Helps pass the winter. She moved closer, examining a finished table. The wood was smooth as glass, the joints perfect. You could sell these. They're exceptional. Don't need money. Then why make them? He was quiet for a long moment. Keeps my hands busy. Keeps my mind quiet. There was something in his voice, a darkness, a pain. Before she could stop herself, Sarah asked, "The war?" His whole body went rigid. When he turned to look at her, his expression was shuttered, cold. Don't ask about things that don't concern you, Miss Mitchell. He walked out, leaving her alone in the workshop, her heart aching for reasons she couldn't quite name. That night she woke to sounds from his room, low, guttural sounds. At first she thought he was sick, but then she recognized them. Nightmares. He was having nightmares. She should have stayed in bed, should have ignored it, but something pulled her out from under her warm blankets. Something made her pad across the cold floor to his door. She knocked softly. "Mr. Blackwood?" The sounds stopped. Silence. "Are you all right?" More silence. Then his voice, rough and raw. "Go back to bed." She should have. Instead, she found herself opening the door. The room was dark except for moonlight streaming through the window. Elijah sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, his broad back heaving with each breath. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and even in the dim light, she could see the scars that crisscrossed his skin. So many scars. I told you to go. You were having a nightmare, and that's my business, not yours. He didn't look up. Close the door on your way out. Instead, Sarah stepped inside. She didn't know what possessed her, what gave her the courage. Maybe it was the raw pain in his voice. Maybe it was the loneliness she'd felt radiating from him since the day they met. Maybe it was something else entirely. She moved to his small dresser, poured water from the pitcher into a basin, and brought it to him. Here, splash your face. It helps. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then slowly he lifted his head and looked at her. His eyes were haunted, lost. He took the basin with trembling hands, splashed water on his face. Thank you, he said quietly. Sarah sat down on the chair by his window, leaving space between them. Do you want to talk about it? No. All right, they sat in silence. Outside, wind whistled through the pines. Inside, the air felt heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Elijah spoke. Why aren't you afraid of me? The question startled her. Should I be? Everyone else is. You've never given me reason to fear you. He let out a harsh laugh. You don't know what I've done, what I'm capable of. I know you've been nothing but respectful to me. I know you work hard. I know you make beautiful things with your hands. She paused. I know you have nightmares, and you try to suffer through them alone. His jaw clenched. I fought in the war, saw things, did things that would make you sick if I told you. So did many men, not like me. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. They called me the devil of Devil's Ridge. When I fought, I didn't stop, couldn't stop. Blood and rage, and he shook his head. Afterward, when it was over, I came here, thought maybe I could find peace. But some things you can't outrun. Sarah's throat tightened. Is that why you live alone? People are afraid of me, and they should be. I'm dangerous, Miss Mitchell, more dangerous than you can imagine. She stood up, moved closer to him. He tensed, every muscle in his massive body coiling, but she didn't stop. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and placed her hand on his scarred shoulder. His skin was warm beneath her palm. She felt him shudder at the contact. Maybe, she said softly, you're only dangerous to people who mean harm. Maybe to someone who needed protection. You'd be the safest person in the world. He turned his head to look at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. Longing, pain, hope, all tangled together. His hand came up, covered hers where it rested on his shoulder. His hand was so large it engulfed hers completely. You should go, he said, but there was no force behind the words. Do you want me to? No, the word was torn from him. But you should anyway, because if you stay, I'm going to want things I have no right to want. Her heart hammered in her chest. What things? His thumbs stroked over her knuckles, gentle despite the calluses. To hold you, to keep you safe, to hear you say my name without fear in your voice. His eyes met hers. To kiss you until neither of us can breathe. Heat flooded through her, pooling low in her belly. She should be shocked, should be scandalized. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "Then why don't you?" He stood up so fast she stumbled backward, but his hands shot out to steady her, careful, always so careful. He towered over her, this mountain of a man, his eyes burning with an intensity that should have frightened her. Because you deserve better than a broken monster. You're not a monster. You don't know that. Yes, she said firmly, I do. A monster wouldn't have nightmares about the things he's done. A monster wouldn't live alone to protect others from himself. A monster wouldn't be this gentle with me. His hands tightened on her arms, not hurting, never hurting, but holding her there. Sarah! Her name on his lips was a prayer and a curse. Don't say things like that. Don't make me hope. Hope for what? That maybe I could be the kind of man who deserves to touch you, hold you, maybe even... He stopped. Shook his head. No, it's impossible. She reached up, had to rise on her toes to do it, and touched his scarred face. He flinched, but didn't pull away. Nothing's impossible, Elijah. Hearing his first name seemed to break something in him. With a sound that was half groan, half growl, he pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like bands of steel. She was so small against him, the top of her head barely reached his chest, but she felt safe, cherished. His heart thundered against her ear. His breath was ragged, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I'm only dangerous to anyone who lays a hand on you, anyone who tries to hurt you, but never, never to you. She tilted her head back to look at him. I know. And then he was kissing her. His mouth claimed hers with a hunger that stole her breath, but his hands remained gentle, cradling her face like she was made of glass. She'd never been kissed before, but her body knew what to do, melting against him, her hands fisting in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "This is madness," he whispered. "Probably. You've only been here a week. I know. I'm twice your size. Scarred. Damaged. I don't care." He pulled back to look at her, searching her face. "You should. But I don't." She smiled up at him, this giant of a man with his haunted eyes and gentle hands. "Maybe I'm a little mad too." A sound escaped him, something between a laugh and a sob. He pulled her close again, buried his face in her hair. "Stay with me. Not just tonight. Stay. I'm not going anywhere." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the night wind howling outside, while something warm and precious bloomed between them in the darkness. The next morning, everything had changed, and nothing had changed. Sarah still rose before dawn, still made breakfast. Elijah still ate in silence. But now, when their eyes met across the table, heat flared between them. Now, when she brought him lunch, his fingers would brush hers as he took the basket, lingering just a moment too long. Now, when he came in for dinner, he'd find excuses to touch her, a hand on her back as he passed, his fingers catching her hair when it fell across her face. Small touches, careful touches, but each one sent electricity singing through her veins. A week passed. 2. Sarah learned the rhythm of the ranch, the patterns of Elijah's days. She learned that he loved coffee strong enough to strip paint, that he had a sweet tooth he tried to hide, that he sang when he worked in the barn, low and rough but beautiful, that he read late into the night, poetry mostly, which surprised her. She discovered he was far more educated than she'd expected. He'd quote Shakespeare while mending fences, discuss philosophy while chopping wood. When she asked about it, he'd shrugged, almost embarrassed. "My mother was a teacher," he'd said. "Before she died, she made sure I could read and write. Said a man needed more than just his hands to make his way in the world." She was right. Maybe. Didn't help much in the war, though. Can't quote poetry to stop a bullet. The darkness in his voice made her ache. She'd moved closer to where he sat at the table, placed her hand on his shoulder. He'd covered it with his own, that simple touch saying more than words ever could. She also learned he had a sense of humor, dry and unexpected. One morning she'd burned the biscuits, frustrated with herself as she scraped the blackened edges. He'd come in, taken one look, and said completely seriously, "I like them crunchy." Then he'd bitten into one with an exaggerated crunch that made her laugh despite herself. "They're terrible. They're made by you. That makes them perfect." She'd thrown a dish rag at him. He'd caught it easily, his lips quirking in what might have been a smile. But it was the little things that truly revealed his character. The way he'd found an injured bird and nursed it back to health. His massive hands, infinitely gentle. The way he'd carved a wooden spoon for her, because he noticed her struggling with the heavy iron one. The way he'd fashioned a step stool so she could reach the high shelves without asking for help. "I noticed you stretching," he'd said when he presented it to her. "Didn't want you to hurt yourself." Every gesture, every kindness made her fall deeper. One afternoon, Sarah was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Her heart jumped into her throat. Elijah was in the far pasture, too far to hear her call. 3 men rode into the yard, and everything about them screamed trouble. Rough clothes, harder eyes, the kind of men who took what they wanted. The leader, a man with a scar across his cheek and tobacco-stained teeth, dismounted. His eyes raked over Sarah in a way that made her skin crawl. "Well, well, didn't know Blackwood had himself a woman." His voice was oily. "Wrong. Pretty little thing, too." Sarah backed toward the house. "My husband will be back soon. You should leave." "Husband?" The man laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "That monster? You're lying. No woman would marry that scarred devil." "I'm not lying. Leave, now." The other 2 men had dismounted as well, fanning out. The leader took a step forward. "Maybe you need some real men to show you a good time. What do you say, boys?" Terror flooded through her, but Sarah refused to show it. Her hand found the clothesline pole, gripping it like a weapon. "Touch me, and you'll regret it." The man laughed again, reaching for her. "Feisty. I like—" He never finished the sentence. A roar, inhuman and terrifying, split the air. Elijah appeared from behind the barn, moving faster than a man his size should be able to move. His face was transformed, not the gentle man she knew, but something primal, dangerous. The 3 men froze. The leader went pale. "Blackwood," he breathed. Elijah didn't slow down. He grabbed the leader by the throat, lifting him completely off the ground one-handed. The man's feet kicked uselessly in the air. "You touched my wife?" Elijah's voice was barely recognizable, a growl that raised the hair on Sarah's arms. "No, no, I swear, Elijah threw him. Actually threw him a good 10 feet. The man hit the ground hard, gasping. The other two scrambled for their horses, but Elijah was faster. He grabbed one by the back of his shirt, spun him around and delivered a punch that sent him sprawling. The third man pulled a knife. Sarah screamed, but Elijah caught the man's wrist, twisted, and the knife fell to the ground. Another punch, and that man joined his friends in the dirt. The leader was trying to crawl toward his horse. Elijah planted a boot on his back, pinning him. "Please," the man begged. "We didn't know she was yours. We didn't mean—" "You looked at her." Elijah's voice was deadly quiet now, which was somehow worse than the roar. "You threatened her. You reached for her." He leaned down. "I should kill you. Would be easy, justifiable even." "Elijah," Sarah's voice cut through the rage. "Don't." He looked up at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The monster he feared he was, the man he wanted to be. She walked to him carefully, placed her hand on his arm. "They're not worth it. Let them go." For a long moment he didn't move. Then, slowly, he lifted his boot. The 3 men scrambled to their horses, mounting with frantic haste. The leader looked back once, terror written across his face. "Tell everyone," Elijah said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Tell them Elijah Blackwood has a wife. Tell them anyone who looks at her wrong, who speaks to her with disrespect, who even thinks about touching her will answer to me. Spread the word." They rode off like the devil himself was chasing them. Maybe he was. When they were gone, Elijah turned to Sarah. The rage was draining from his face, replaced by concern. "Did they hurt you? Did they touch you?" "No, you got here in time. I heard you from the pasture. Heard the fear in your voice, and He looked at his hands, still clenched into fists. "I almost killed them. Would have if you hadn't stopped me." Sarah took his hands, uncurled his fingers, laced them with hers. "But you didn't. You listened to me." "Sarah, you saw what I become. The rage, the violence, that's what they meant when they called me a monster." "What I saw," she said firmly, "was a man protecting his wife. There's a difference between violence for pleasure and violence for protection. You weren't enjoying it. You were defending me. I lost control." "No, you had complete control. You could have killed them easily. You didn't. You let them go because I asked you to." She squeezed his hands. "That's not a monster, Elijah. That's a good man." He pulled her against his chest, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. His heart thundered against her ear. "If anything had happened to you, it didn't. You saved me." They stood like that for a long time, the laundry forgotten, the world narrowed to just the two of them. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet. "I meant what I said. Anyone who threatens you will have to go through me. I know, and I'm grateful." She smiled up at him. "My dangerous cowboy." He huffed a laugh, still shaky. "Your dangerous cowboy." I liked the sound of that. That night he was different, more possessive, more intense. When they lay in bed, his arms wrapped around her, he whispered fiercely in her ear, "You're mine, Sarah. Mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to love. No one takes what's mine." The primitive possessiveness should have frightened her. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly. "Yours," she agreed. "Always yours." He made love to her differently that night, with an urgency that bordered on desperation, as though reassuring himself she was safe, she was his, she was here. And she gave herself to him completely, understanding that this was how he processed fear, how he reaffirmed life after violence. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, sweaty and satisfied, he pressed kisses to her temple, her cheek, her shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For not being afraid of me, even after seeing what I can do." She turned to face him. "I told you, I'm only afraid for you, never of you. There's a difference." And she learned about his scars, not all at once, but slowly, as he began to trust her with his past. They'd been married during the war, he told her one night by the fire. Her name was Mary. She'd been killed when their homestead was raided, while he'd been away fighting. He blamed himself, had blamed himself for 5 years. "I should have been there," he said, staring into the flames. "Should have protected her." Sarah sat beside him on the floor, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You can't be everywhere at once. You were fighting for your country." "I was killing people." His voice was flat. "I was good at it, too good. And when Mary died, I stopped caring, stopped feeling, just became a weapon." He turned to look at her. "That's what they don't tell you about war, how easy it becomes to stop being human." She took his hand, lacing her small fingers through his massive ones. "But you came back, you rebuilt. You're still human, Elijah. Some days I wonder. I don't. I see you with the horses, gentle as anything. I see you carving wood with those big hands, making beautiful things. I see you trying so hard not to scare me." She squeezed his fingers. "You're the most human person I know." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his lap, cradling her against his chest. She fit there perfectly, her head tucked under his chin. His heart beat steady beneath her ear. "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly. "Probably already have. But Sarah, I'm terrified. Terrified I'll fail you like I failed Mary. Terrified my demons will hurt you. Terrified you'll wake up one day and see me for what I really am and run." She turned in his arms to face him. "I see you, Elijah. All of you. The scars, the nightmares, the pain. And I'm not running. I'm falling too." His eyes searched hers, desperate and hopeful. "You mean that?" Every word. He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring everything he couldn't say into the press of his lips. His hands roamed her back, her sides, always careful, always controlled, but she could feel the tension in him, the desire he held in check. "I want you," he breathed against her mouth. "God, Sarah, I want you so much it hurts, but not until you're ready, not until you're sure." "I'm sure now," he groaned. "You're killing me, woman." "Then stop being so honorable." "Can't. You deserve better." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her nose. "You deserve courting, flowers, and pretty words. A proposal on bended knee, a wedding with your family present." "I don't have family anymore." "Then a wedding where you wear white and smile like you've never smiled before." His thumb traced her lower lip. "I want to do this right. You understand?" She did, and she loved him more for it. Spring came slowly to the mountains, but it came. The snow melted, revealing green beneath. Wildflowers bloomed. The chickens Elijah had ordered arrived, and Sarah delighted in gathering eggs each morning. The garden was planted, neat rows of vegetables that she tended daily, and their love grew. Elijah courted her, awkward and earnest. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadow, arriving at the door with massive hands clutching delicate blooms, his expression almost shy. "Thought you might like these." She'd pressed them between the pages of his poetry book, preserving each one. He carved her a jewelry box with roses on the lid, spending weeks on the intricate details. When he presented it to her, he wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's not much. It's beautiful. Everything you make is beautiful. Not as beautiful as you." The compliment, so simple and sincere, made her heart flutter. He read her poetry by firelight, his deep voice making the words come alive. Byron, Keats, Whitman. She'd curl against his side, listening to verses about love and longing, and think that nothing written could compare to what she felt. He took her riding on his massive horse, her body cradled between his arms as they explored the mountain trails. He showed her a waterfall hidden in the forest, the water ice cold but crystal clear, a meadow where elk grazed at dawn, a cliff overlooking the valley where eagles nested. "This land," he said one day, as they sat on that cliff, her back against his chest. "It's wild and hard, but it's honest. It doesn't pretend to be anything it's not. Like you." He was quiet for a moment. "I spent so long trying to hide what I was. Thought if I just stayed away from people, I couldn't hurt anyone. But you," his arms tightened around her, "you made me want to stop hiding." She turned in his embrace to kiss him. "I'm glad. The world deserves to see how wonderful you are. The world sees a scarred killer. Then the world is blind." One morning, Sarah woke to find Elijah gone and a note on the table. "Gone to town. Back by noon. Don't worry." She smiled at his careful script. He always worried that she worried. But noon came and went. 1 o'clock. 2. By 3, Sarah was pacing the porch, anxiety gnawing at her stomach. What if something had happened? What if those men had come back with friends? What if... The sound of horses made her spin around, but it wasn't Elijah on his black gelding. It was a wagon, pulled by 2 horses, and Elijah driving. He pulled up to the cabin with a grin she'd never seen before, boyish and excited. What is all this?" The wagon was full. Fabric, ribbons, thread in every color, a new cast-iron stove, lumber, seeds, tools, books. So many books. Elijah jumped down, came to her. I sold 3 tables and a dresser to the mercantile owner. Got a good price. He gestured to the wagon. Thought you might want some things. Make the place more yours. Sarah's throat tightened. Elijah, this is too much. No. He cupped her face in his hands. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's a start. He kissed her forehead. Besides, I saw the way you looked at that fabric in the general store last time we went to town. Thought you might want to make some new curtains. Maybe a dress. She had looked at it longingly. Beautiful floral print she'd never be able to afford, and he'd remembered. There's more, he said, almost shyly. He reached into the wagon and pulled out a package wrapped in brown paper. Open it. Inside was a book. But not just any book. A journal bound in leather with her name embossed on the cover in gold letters. Sarah Mitchell Blackwood. Thought you might want to write, he said. You're always telling me stories. Thought maybe you should write them down. She couldn't speak. Could only throw her arms around his neck and hold on tight. He caught her easily, lifting her off the ground. I love you, she managed finally. So much. I love you too, more than I know how to say. He set her down, brushed a tear from her cheek. Now come on, help me unload all this before it gets dark. They spent the evening sorting through everything. Sarah exclaimed over each item, her joy making his face light up in ways she'd never seen. He'd thought of everything. New dishes because the old ones were chipped. Soft wool blankets. A rocking chair he must have commissioned from someone in town, because it was far too fine for his own rough hands to have made. This must have cost a fortune, she said, running her hand over the smooth wood. Worth every penny to see you smile like that. That night, after they'd made love and lay drowsy in each other's arms, Sarah asked the question that had been on her mind all evening. Elijah, why did you really go to town today? He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, I wanted to show them. Show them what? That I'm not just the monster in the mountains. That I'm a man with a wife who loves him. A man building a life. His hand found hers in the darkness. I wanted them to see that I'm more than what they think I am. And did they? Some did. Some didn't. But the ones who mattered, the shopkeepers who took my money and smiled, they did. That's enough. Sarah squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you. Don't know why. I'm just trying to be worthy of you. You already are. As the weeks passed, more people came to the ranch. Not many, but enough. The circuit preacher stopped by, nervous at first, until Elijah offered him coffee and conversation. A family whose wagon had broken down nearby knocked on their door, desperate for help. Elijah fixed their wheel, refused payment, and sent them on their way with fresh supplies. Why didn't you take their money? Sarah asked after they'd gone. They offered. They needed it more than we do. He shrugged. Besides, felt good to help. Sarah watched him return to his work, this giant of a man with his scarred face and gentle heart, and felt a fierce surge of love. The world had called him a monster, but she knew the truth. He was a hero, just one who'd forgotten how to see himself clearly. One evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sun set. Sarah worked on her embroidery, creating curtains for the windows. Elijah whittled, his knife moving with practiced ease as he shaped wood into something beautiful. Tell me about Mary, Sarah said quietly. His hands stilled. She'd never asked directly before, sensing it was too painful, but she wanted to know. Needed to understand the woman who'd come before her. Why? Because she was part of your life, part of who you are. I want to know her. Elijah set down his knife, staring out at the mountains. She was kind, gentle, loved to sing, though she couldn't carry a tune to save her life. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. We married young, just 18. She was my best friend's sister. I never thought someone like her would look twice at someone like me. Someone like you. I was big even then, quiet. Other boys teased me, called me simple because I didn't talk much. He shook his head. But Mary, she saw past that. Saw something worth loving. She had good taste. He glanced at her, and she saw the pain in his eyes. When she died, part of me died too. I blamed myself for years. If I'd been there, if I'd protected her like I should have, it wasn't your fault. I know that. Now, he reached for her hand, but it took a long time to believe it. Took meeting you to understand that maybe I deserved a second chance. And do you still love her? He considered the question carefully. I'll always love her. She was my first love. My first wife. But what I feel for you, he turned to face her fully. It's different. Deeper, maybe. Or just different because I'm different. I'm not that boy anymore. I'm a man who's seen the worst of the world and somehow found the best of it in you. Sarah set aside her embroidery and moved to sit on his lap. He adjusted easily, his arms coming around her. "I'm not jealous of her," she said softly. "I just wanted to understand. She'd like you, I think. Would be glad I found someone." His hand stroked her hair. "Would tell me I'm a lucky bastard and better not mess it up." Sarah laughed softly. "Smart woman, the smartest, both of you." They sat like that as the stars came out, comfortable in the silence, secure in their love. He was patient. So patient, even when their kisses grew heated, when she pressed against him and felt the evidence of his desire, he'd pull back, breathing hard, and whisper that they should wait. "I want our wedding night to be special," he'd say. "Want to do right by you." And she'd agree, even though her body ached for his touch. But the waiting was its own kind of torture, sweet, delicious torture. The tension between them built with each passing day. Every innocent touch became charged with meaning. Every glance held promise. Every goodnight kiss left them both trembling. One hot afternoon in early summer, Sarah was working in the garden when she heard a crash from the barn. She dropped her tools and ran, her heart in her throat. "Elijah!" She found him in the barn, pinned under a fallen beam. He'd been working on repairs, and something had given way. His face was tight with pain, his leg trapped. "I'm all right," he gritted out. "Just need to lift this." "You can't lift it. You're under it." Sarah looked around frantically. "Hold on." She found a long piece of timber, wedged it under the beam, and used it as a lever. Slowly, inch by inch, she lifted the beam enough for Elijah to drag himself free. The moment he was clear, she dropped the timber and fell to her knees beside him. "Let me see." His left leg was scraped and bleeding, but nothing seemed broken. She helped him to his feet, let him lean his considerable weight on her small frame as they made their way to the house. Inside, she sat him in a chair and fetched water, clean cloths, bandages. As she cleaned the wound, her hands were steady even though her heart still raced. "This might sting. I've had worse." She knew he had. The scars on his body told stories of pain she couldn't imagine. But that didn't mean she wanted him to hurt now. As she worked, she became aware of his eyes on her. Intense, burning. When she glanced up, the heat in his gaze stole her breath. "What? You saved me. You would have gotten out eventually. Maybe. But you didn't hesitate, didn't panic, just did what needed doing." His hand came up to cup her face. "You're so small, but you've got the heart of a lion. I couldn't let you be hurt." "Sarah," he pulled her onto his lap, mindful of his injured leg. "I don't deserve you." "Yes, you do." "No." He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. "But I'm going to spend every day trying to." The kiss deepened, grew urgent. His hands roamed her back, pulled her closer. She could feel every inch of him, hard and wanting beneath her. Her own body responded, heat flooding through her veins. "Elijah," she breathed against his mouth. "I know. I know." He pulled back, his breathing ragged. "We should stop." "Why?" "Because if we don't, I won't be able to. And I want our first time to be after we're married. Want to do this right." She understood, respected it even. But that didn't make the wanting any easier. On a warm evening in April, Elijah asked her to walk with him. They followed a trail to a clearing overlooking the valley, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. He seemed nervous, this giant of a man, fidgeting with something in his pocket. "Sarah," he began, then stopped, took a breath, started again. "When you came here, I was barely living, just existing, going through the motions. The nightmares were getting worse. Some days I thought about just giving up." Her throat tightened. She took his hand. "But then you walked up my porch steps, this tiny woman with fire in her eyes, and everything changed. You brought light back into my life, joy, hope. You made me want to be better, to be the man you see when you look at me." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "You made me believe I could be loved, that I was worth loving." He dropped to one knee, and even kneeling he was almost as tall as her. From his pocket he pulled a ring, simple gold with a small diamond that caught the dying sunlight. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "The only thing of value I own besides this ranch. She gave it to me before she died, made me promise I'd only give it to a woman I'd love forever." His dark eyes met hers, vulnerable and hopeful. "Sarah Mitchell, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I promise to spend every day trying to deserve you, to protect you, cherish you, love you with everything I am. I promise to be patient when you need it, strong when you're weak, gentle always. I promise to build you a life worth living, a home worth keeping, a love worth having." The tears streamed down her cheeks. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her. Then he stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around while she laughed and cried simultaneously. When he set her down, he kissed her with such tenderness, such love, that she felt it all the way to her soul. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you more than I thought possible." His hands framed her face. "Thank you for seeing past the monster to the man underneath. There never was a monster, Elijah, only a man who needed to be loved." They stood there as the sun set completely, wrapped in each other's arms, the future spread before them bright with promise. They were married a month later by the circuit preacher in town. Sarah wore a simple white dress she'd sewn herself from the fabric Elijah had bought her. She'd worked on it for weeks, every stitch a labor of love, adding delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Elijah wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, though the scar on his face was as prominent as ever. He didn't care, neither did she. The wedding was held in the small church at the edge of town. Sarah had no family, but several of the townspeople came, curious or genuinely happy for them. The mercantile owner and his wife sat in the front row, smiling. The family whose wagon Elijah had fixed brought flowers from their own garden. Even the sheriff attended, tipping his hat respectfully to the couple. The townsfolk stared, whispered. Sarah could hear the murmurs. "Can't believe she's really marrying him. Poor thing must be desperate. He'll probably hurt her within a year." She held her head high, her hand firmly in Elijah's massive one. Let them talk. Let them judge. She knew the truth, but Elijah heard them too. She felt him tense beside her, saw the way his jaw tightened. Before he could pull away, could let their words poison this moment, she squeezed his hand and leaned close. "They're just jealous," she whispered, "because I'm marrying the best man in Colorado, and they let fear blind them to what was right in front of them." His eyes met hers, vulnerable and grateful. "You really believe that?" "With all my heart." The ceremony was simple, but beautiful. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, the silence was absolute. When he asked Elijah to recite his vows, the big man's voice was steady and clear. "Sarah, I promise to love you every day of my life, to protect you with my last breath, to be the husband you deserve, even when I don't think I'm worthy. I promise to make you laugh, to dry your tears, to hold you when you're scared and celebrate with you when you're happy. You've given me back my life, and I'll spend the rest of it making sure you never regret choosing me." There wasn't a dry eye in the church, Sarah noticed. Even some of the men were wiping at their faces. When it was her turn, Sarah spoke from her heart. "Elijah, I promise to stand by your side through whatever comes, to see you for who you truly are, not what others think you should be. I promise to love you on your hardest days and your easiest ones, to build a home with you, a life with you, a future with you. You are my heart, my home, my everything." The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Elijah kissed her, there was nothing gentle about it. It was possessive, claiming, a promise of what was to come. It was a kiss that said mine, a kiss that said forever, a kiss that left her breathless and wanting. Several women in the small gathering gasped. Sarah simply smiled against his mouth, her arms wrapping around his neck as much as she could reach. When they finally broke apart, she saw tears streaming down his scarred face. "My wife," he said, wonder in his voice. "My husband," she replied, joy flooding through her. The mercantile owner had prepared a small reception, nothing fancy, just cake and punch in the church hall. People congratulated them, some genuine, others merely polite. But Sarah and Elijah barely noticed. They only had eyes for each other. An older woman, someone Sarah didn't recognize, approached them as they stood by the cake. Her face was kind, lined with age and wisdom. "You're Mary's husband," she said to Elijah. He went still, his whole body tensing. "I was, yes. She was a good friend of mine. Talked about you all the time." The woman smiled. "Used to say you were the gentlest soul she'd ever known, despite what others thought. Said you had a heart bigger than the mountains." Elijah's throat worked. "She said that? Every chance she got, she loved you fiercely." The woman turned to Sarah. "And she'd be happy, I think, to know you found love again, to know her Elijah found someone to care for him the way he deserves." Sarah felt her own tears rising. "Thank you for telling us that." The woman patted Elijah's arm. "Be happy, both of you. You deserve it." As she walked away, Elijah pulled Sarah close. "I needed to hear that. he whispered. Needed to know Mary wouldn't, that she'd be okay with this. She loved you. Of course she'd want you to be happy. I am. Happier than I ever thought I'd be again. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set. Sarah cradled in Elijah's arms on his horse. He couldn't seem to stop touching her, his hand stroking her hair, her back, as though reassuring himself she was real. She was his. This wasn't a dream. Mrs. Blackwood, he murmured against her hair. I like the sound of that. So do I. Been thinking about it for weeks. Sarah Blackwood. My Sarah. When they reached the cabin, he dismounted first, then lifted her down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he cradled her against his chest. Elijah, what are you carrying my bride over the threshold? His eyes gleamed with mischief and heat. It's tradition. You don't have to. I want to. Want to do everything right. Want to give you every romantic gesture, every tradition, every moment you deserve. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind them. The cabin glowed with candlelight. She'd prepared it that morning, and the fire crackled merrily in the hearth. Rose petals were scattered across the floor, leading to the bedroom. She'd done that too, wanting everything to be perfect. Sarah, he breathed, seeing the care she'd taken. It's beautiful. I wanted tonight to be special. It already is. You're my wife. That makes it the most special night of my life. He carried her to the bedroom and set her gently on the bed, the same bed where they'd shared so many sweet kisses, where he'd held her through nightmares, where they'd whispered secrets in the dark. But tonight was different. Tonight, they belonged to each other completely. Then he stood there, this mountain of a man, and she saw uncertainty flicker across his face. I've been with a woman before, he said quietly, but it's been years, 5 years, and you're so small, Sarah. I don't want to hurt you. I'm afraid I won't be gentle enough, that I'll lose control, that I'll... She stood up, moved to him, began unbuttoning his shirt with trembling fingers. You won't. You could never hurt me. You're the gentlest man I've ever known. I'm not a gentle man by nature. You're gentle with me. You always have been. She pushed his shirt off his shoulders, revealing the expanse of scarred muscle beneath. Each scar told a story, a moment of survival, a battle fought. She kissed them one by one, feeling him shudder beneath her touch. Make love to me, Elijah. Please, I need you. He groaned, his control visibly fraying. His hands found the buttons of her dress, but his fingers were shaking. I'm nervous, terrified I'll mess this up, that I won't know how to please you, that I'll be too rough or too quick or... She took his hands, guided them. We'll figure it out together. Just touch me, kiss me, love me. And they did. Slowly, carefully, they undressed each other. His hands worshipped every inch of skin revealed, gentle despite their size and strength. Her fingers traced his scars, each one a story, a survival, evidence that he'd endured, and returned to her. You're so beautiful, he whispered, his eyes roaming over her body. Perfect. Mine. Yours, she agreed. Always yours. When they finally came together, it was awkward at first. He was so large, and she was so small. The initial pain made her gasp, and he immediately froze. I'm hurting you, we should stop. No. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulled him closer. Don't stop, just go slow. Give me time. He did, patient beyond measure, whispering love words against her skin as he moved slowly, giving her body time to adjust. He kissed away her tears, murmured apologies and praises in equal measure, and gradually the pain faded, replaced by something else, something warm and wonderful and right. Okay? He asked, his voice strained with the effort of holding back. More than okay, don't hold back anymore. I want all of you. He made love to her then, with a passion that stole her breath. Powerful but never rough, demanding but never forceful. And when they finally reached that peak together, crying out in each other's arms, Sarah understood why people wrote poetry about this. It wasn't just physical pleasure, though there was plenty of that. It was connection, completion, two souls becoming one. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. She traced patterns on his scarred skin, marveling at how perfectly they fit, despite their size difference. Are you all right? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. I wasn't too rough. I didn't hurt you. You were perfect. It was perfect. He kissed the top of her head. I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. I love you too. She tilted her head to look at him. No more nightmares? He considered. Maybe, but if they come, I'll have you to wake up to. That makes all the difference. She smiled, snuggling closer. My dangerous cowboy. Your dangerous cowboy, he agreed, his arms tightening around her. "Only dangerous to anyone who tries to take you from me." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other. Two broken souls who'd found healing in each other's arms. The next few days passed in a blissful haze. They barely left the bedroom, making up for months of restraint. Elijah was an attentive lover, learning her body with the same focus he brought to his woodworking. He discovered what made her gasp, what made her moan, what made her call his name in breathless pleasure. And she learned him too, learned that for all his size and strength, he was vulnerable in her hands, that certain touches made him groan, certain words made him lose control, certain looks made him pull her close and kiss her senseless. "You're going to be the death of me, woman," he'd say, and she'd laugh and kiss him and prove him wrong in the best possible way. But eventually, they had to return to reality. There was a ranch to run, work to be done, life to be lived. They fell into new rhythms. Married rhythms. He'd pull her onto his lap while she was cooking, nuzzle her neck until she swatted him away, laughing. She'd ambush him in the barn with kisses, making him forget whatever task he'd been working on. They'd make love in the afternoon on a blanket in the meadow, under the stars on the porch, in the kitchen against the counter when the desire became too much to wait. "Insatiable," she'd tease. "For you, always. The summer was glorious." Sarah's garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables for their table. The chickens laid eggs faithfully. Elijah's furniture business grew as word spread of his skill, and though he grumbled about visitors, she could see he took pride in his work. But the best part was watching him come alive. The haunted look faded from his eyes. He smiled more, laughed even. The nightmares still came occasionally, but less frequently. And when they did, she was there to hold him, to whisper reassurances until he calmed. They fell into an easy rhythm. Mornings began with lazy kisses and whispered conversations. Days were filled with work, but they'd steal moments, him pulling her into the barn for a kiss, her surprising him in the workshop with lunch, and staying for more than lunch. Evenings were spent on the porch watching the sunset, her tucked against his side. One evening in late summer, Sarah worked up the courage to share her news. She'd suspected for weeks, but now she was certain. The morning sickness, the tenderness in her breasts, the way certain smells made her nauseous. She'd counted the days, done the math, and there was no doubt. At dinner, she set down her fork and cleared her throat. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached across the table. "Elijah, I need to tell you something." He looked up from his plate, concern immediately crossing his face. He set down his own fork, gave her his complete attention. "What's wrong? Are you sick? Do you need the doctor?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's right." She took his hand, marveling as always at how her fingers disappeared in his grip. "I'm carrying our child." He went completely still, not breathing, not moving, just staring at her with those dark eyes gone wide. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. "Elijah," worry crept in. "Say something, please. He swallowed hard, his throat working. "A baby?" "Yes, I'm about 2 months along, I think. The baby should come in early spring." For a moment she worried about his reaction. They'd never discussed children, never talked about expanding their family. What if he didn't want this? What if... His face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen, transforming his harsh features into something beautiful. He stood up so fast his chair toppled over with a crash, came around the table and dropped to his knees in front of her. His large hands splayed across her still flat stomach, reverent and gentle. "A baby," he whispered, awed. "Our baby." He looked up at her, and she saw tears streaming down his scarred face. "Sarah, are you sure? Really sure?" "I'm sure. We're going to be parents, Elijah." He pressed his forehead to her stomach, his shoulders shaking. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." She ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling. "Are you happy?" He looked up at her again, and the joy in his expression stole her breath. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified, overwhelmed, grateful, amazed, blessed beyond measure, all of it. He kissed her stomach through the fabric of her dress. "I'm going to be a father. You're going to be a wonderful father. I don't know how. I don't know the first thing about babies. What if I hold him too tight? What if I drop her? What if I mess this up like I've messed up everything else?" She cupped his face in her hands, made him look at her. "You won't. You'll figure it out. Just like we've figured out everything else together, and you haven't messed up everything else. You've built a life, a home, a marriage. You'll be an amazing father because you have the biggest heart of anyone I know. What if I pass on my darkness, my nightmares? What if... Stop! She kissed him softly. You're not passing on darkness, you're creating light. This baby is a symbol of hope, of healing, of love, conquering pain. Don't you see that? He pulled her off the chair and into his arms, holding her with exquisite care as though she might break. I promise, he whispered against her hair, I'll never let anything happen to either of you. You're my whole world, both of you. I'll protect you with my life. That night, he held her with even more care than usual, his hand never leaving her stomach, as though already protecting the life growing inside her. He talked to her belly, whispering promises and dreams. I'm your papa, he said softly, and I can't wait to meet you. Your mama is the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman in the world, and you're lucky to have her. I'll teach you everything I know. How to ride, how to work with your hands, how to be kind, even when the world is cruel. I'll keep you safe. Keep both of you safe always. Sarah fell asleep listening to his deep voice, feeling more loved and protected than she ever had. The months that followed were a blur of preparations and changes. Elijah built a cradle, beautiful and sturdy, with tiny horses carved into the headboard. He spent weeks on it, working late into the night, sanding every surface until it was smooth as silk. Can't have any splinters, he explained when she found him in the workshop at midnight, his hands moving over the wood with infinite care. Baby's skin will be so soft, so delicate. He added a room to the cabin for the nursery, working tirelessly to have it ready before winter set in. He painted the walls a soft yellow, built shelves for toys and books, fashioned a changing table at just the right height for Sarah to use comfortably. He rode to town weekly, sometimes more often, to fetch anything Sarah craved. Pickles at midnight, he'd brave the cold to get them from the mercantile owner who he'd wake up. Strawberries in winter, he'd search every store until he found some preserved ones. Whatever she wanted, no matter how strange or difficult, he'd get it. You're spoiling me, she'd say. You're carrying my child. I'd move mountains if you asked. And as her belly grew, so did his protectiveness. By her 5th month, when her pregnancy became obvious, he barely let her lift a finger, insisted she rest constantly, worried over every twinge and pain, followed her around like an anxious shadow, ready to catch her if she stumbled. Elijah, I'm pregnant, not fragile, she'd say, exasperated and touched in equal measure. You're carrying precious cargo, my precious cargo. I'm allowed to worry. I can still gather eggs. No, what if you slip? What if a chicken pecks you and you fall? Chickens don't. I'll gather the eggs, you rest. She'd laugh and shake her head, but secretly she loved his devotion. Every overprotective gesture, every worried glance, every gentle touch spoke of how much he cared. The townspeople's attitude toward them began to shift as word of the pregnancy spread. Women who'd whispered about her before now smiled and offered advice. Men who'd crossed the street to avoid Elijah now nodded in greeting. A baby had a way of softening even the hardest hearts. The mercantile owner's wife, Mrs. Henderson, visited one afternoon with a basket of baby clothes her own children had outgrown. Thought you might be able to use these, she said, her smile genuine. And if you need anything at all, you just let me know. The family whose wagon Elijah had fixed sent a beautiful quilt, hand-stitched with love. Other gifts followed, a rattle, tiny booties, a soft blanket. People who'd feared Elijah now saw him differently, as a man about to become a father, as someone building a family. One evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah's hand resting on her swollen belly, Elijah spoke quietly. They're treating us different now. They're seeing what I always saw, that you're a good man. Or they just like babies, she laughed. Maybe both. Does it bother you? He considered. No, it's nice, feeling like part of the community instead of the monster on the mountain. He placed his hand over hers on her belly, and the baby kicked beneath their joined hands. He sucked in a breath. Did you feel that? That's your child saying hello. His eyes went bright with tears. Hello, little one, he whispered. Can't wait to meet you. As winter approached and her due date grew closer, Elijah became even more anxious. He made sure they had extra firewood, extra supplies, everything they might need in case they got snowed in. He'd arranged for the midwife from town to stay with them the last few weeks, just in case the baby came early or bad weather prevented her from reaching them in time. Mrs. Clary, the midwife, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who delivered half the babies in the county. She took one look at Elijah, hovering nervously, and patted his arm. "First-time fathers are always the worst," she said dryly. "Try not to worry yourself to death before the baby even arrives. Is she okay? Is the baby okay? Should she be having those pains? Is it normal for her ankles to—" "Everything is perfectly normal. Your wife is healthy, the baby is healthy, and you need to calm down before you make yourself sick." But he couldn't calm down. He checked on Sarah constantly, made sure she was comfortable, brought her anything she needed before she could even ask. At night, he'd lie with his ear pressed to her belly, listening to the baby move, his face soft with wonder. In February, the baby came. It was a long labor, and Elijah was beside himself with worry. He paced the cabin like a caged bear while the midwife from town attended to Sarah. Every cry of pain from the bedroom sent him toward the door, only to be turned back by the stern-faced midwife. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, a baby's cry pierced the air. Elijah froze. The midwife emerged, smiling. "It's a boy, big and healthy like his father, and your wife is asking for you." Elijah practically ran into the bedroom. Sarah lay propped against pillows, exhausted but glowing, holding a bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he entered, smiled. "Come meet your son." He approached slowly. This giant of a man, his expression a mixture of wonder and terror. When he saw the baby, he stopped breathing. The infant was tiny, red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair. "He's perfect," Elijah whispered. "He's ours." Sarah held the bundle out. "Hold him." Elijah's hands trembled as he took his son, cradling the baby against his massive chest. The infant looked impossibly small in his arms. "I'm afraid I'll break him." "You won't." The baby's crying stopped. He looked up at his father with unfocused eyes, and Elijah made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Hello, little one. I'm your papa, and I promise I'm going to do better by you than anyone did by me. You're going to grow up knowing you're loved, safe, wanted." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "What should we name him?" Elijah looked at her, then back at the baby. "I was thinking James, after my father. He was a good man before the war took him. James Blackwood. I like it." That night, Elijah sat in the rocking chair he'd made, his son sleeping on his chest, his wife curled up in bed watching them. Moonlight streamed through the window, painting them in silver. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For everything. For not running when you saw who I really was. For loving me anyway. For giving me a family when I thought I'd lost my chance at one." He looked down at the sleeping baby. "For giving me a reason to be better." Sarah smiled. "You were always better, Elijah. You just needed someone to remind you." He stood carefully, settled the baby in his new cradle, then climbed into bed beside his wife. She curled into his side, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. "I used to think I was a monster," he said into the darkness. "Used to think that's all I'd ever be. And now I know I'm just a man who was lost but got found. A man who has everything he never knew he needed." "Or the fierce cowboy and the tiny woman who tamed him?" Sarah teased. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "You didn't tame me. You saved me. There's a difference. We saved each other." "Yeah." He kissed the top of her head. "We did." Outside, the wind whispered through the pines. Inside, a family slept, whole and healed and home. They said he was a monster. They said he was dangerous. They said he'd gone mad in the mountains, that no woman would ever want him, that he'd die alone, with only his demons for company. But they didn't know about the tiny woman who'd walked up his porch steps, with fire in her eyes and love in her heart. They didn't know about the gentle giant who'd learned to hope again. They didn't know about the family built from broken pieces, stronger for having been shattered and reassembled. They said he was a monster, but Sarah knew better. She knew the truth he'd told her that first night she'd touched him. He was only dangerous to anyone who threatened those he loved. To her, to their son, to the family they'd built together, he was the safest place in the world. And that, she thought as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, was all that mattered. Years later, Sarah would sit on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching Elijah teach their 3 children how to ride. James, their oldest, sat tall on his pony, dark-haired like his father. The twins, Mary and Elizabeth, giggled as Elijah led them around the paddock on their smaller mounts. "Gentle now," he'd say, his deep voice patient. "The horse can feel if you're nervous. Be calm, be firm, be kind." Sarah's hand rested on her swelling belly, their 4th child growing inside her. The town still whispered about them sometimes, about the giant scarred man and his tiny wife, about their growing family, about how strange it was that someone like her would choose someone like him. Let them whisper. She'd choose him 1,000 times over, would walk up those porch steps again and again, would reach out to touch his scarred face, would whisper that he wasn't a monster but a man worthy of love, because that's what love did. It saw past the scars to the soul underneath. It took broken pieces and made them whole. It turned nightmares into dreams and loneliness into belonging. Elijah looked up from the paddock, caught her watching, and smiled. That smile that was hers alone, the one that transformed his harsh features into something beautiful. He said something to the children, then walked over to the porch, climbed the steps, and pulled her gently to her feet. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his hands settling on her waist. "How lucky I am." She reached up to touch his face, traced the scar she'd come to love. "How I got the best man in the world, and everyone else was too blind to see it." He leaned down, rested his forehead against hers. "I'm the lucky one. You gave me everything. We gave each other everything." And as the Colorado sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the Blackwood family stood together on their porch. The monster who wasn't, the tiny woman who saw the truth, the children born of their unlikely love. A family built on second chances, healing, and the simple, profound truth that sometimes the most dangerous man in the world is only dangerous when protecting what he loves. And that love, Sarah thought, as Elijah kissed her softly while their children played in the yard, was the most powerful force of all.